21 behavioral statements. If you've internalized the ACC 18 and the PCC 37, these 21 will feel familiar. The language is similar. The competency architecture is identical. The challenge is not learning new statements. It's recalibrating your ear for what mastery sounds like. Because the threshold descriptor changes everything. A statement that reads almost identically to its ACC or PCC equivalent demands something qualitatively different at MCC level. Take M3.1 as an example. It says, partners with the client to identify the focus of the session. A3.1 at ACC said something similar. The coach explores the agenda. PC 3.1 also used the word partners. At MC, partners carries specific weight. It means the client has full autonomy to direct the session, pause the direction, redirect entirely. The coach's contribution to the agreement is so light that it's invisible. The statement looks the same. What it requires of the coach is categorically different. That pattern repeats across all 21 statements, and it's the recalibration you need to internalize. C3 has 4 statements at MCC. M3.1 through M3.4 describe partnership with full client autonomy. What's distinctive is the quality of partnering. At ACC, the coach explored the agenda. At PCC, the coach partnered in a meaning-focused way. At MCC, the partnership is so natural that you can't see the coach's contribution as separate from the client's own process. The meets descriptor at MCC for C3 reads like exceeds at PCC. A coach who earns meets on M3.1 is demonstrating what most PCC evaluators would consider exemplary agreement setting. That recalibration is essential. C4 introduces something that wasn't explicit at lower levels. M4.4 shows empathy. ACC had support. PCC had partnership. MCC has empathy, the deepest layer of relational attunement. Empathy at MCC isn't a technique the coach deploys in selected moments. It's the relational fabric of the entire session. The client feels understood at a level that goes beyond their words, beyond their stated concerns, into who they are. 4.2 talks about support, empathy, and concern. M4.3 about confidence in the client's ability. At MCC, these aren't separate moves. They're the water the coaching relationship swims in. You don't see them as individual behaviors. You feel them as the quality of the connection. C5 at MCC is where the word consistently does heavy lifting. M5.3 says the coach consistently demonstrates curiosity during coaching. At PCC, curiosity was expected. At MCC, it's the coach's default operating mode. It's not something the coach chooses to bring. It's who the coach is in the room. Its absence would feel wrong, like a musician forgetting how to hear. M5.4 creates space for silence, pause, and reflection. Notice creates rather than allows. At PCC, the coach allowed silence. At MCC, the coach's quality of presence actively generates a space where silence becomes the client's workspace. That's a meaningful distinction, and it's one you'll listen for in the recording analysis. C6 consolidates from PCC's 7 markers down to 3. M6.1 notices and reflects nuances of language, emotions, and energy. M6.2 integrates and builds on what the client communicates. M6.3 notices patterns across multiple dimensions of the client. Multiple dimensions is the key phrase. At MCC, listening encompasses the client's identity, their context, their belief systems, their cultural frame. Not just what they're saying, but who they are as they say it. 3 statements that contain everything PCC's 7 markers described, expressed as a single integrated practice. The separate listening behaviors have merged into holistic listening that doesn't need itemization. C7 consolidates from PCC's 8 markers to 3. M7.1 considers what is most useful for the client in each moment. M7.2 shares observations, intuitions, and feelings without attachment. M7.3 asks succinct, open-ended questions one at a time. The word succinct in M7.3 tells you everything about MCC level evoking. The artistry is doing more with less. The question that lands at MCC level is brief, precisely chosen, offered without agenda. Without attachment in M7.2, the coach shares what they notice and genuinely doesn't mind if the client takes it somewhere else entirely. The observation is a gift with no strings. That detachment from outcome is itself a marker of mastery. C8 compresses from PCC's 9 markers to 3. M8.1 partners with the client to reflect on learning. M8.2 partners to translate learning into actions. M8.3 partners to complete the session. The compression tells you something important about MCC coaching. Growth facilitation at mastery level isn't a distinct closing phase. It's woven throughout the session. The client is reflecting on learning at minute 5, not just minute 25. When you evaluate C8 at MCC, look for evidence across the entire session, not just the final segment. The 3 statements capture essentials that appear from beginning to end. Consider C7. At meets, the coach asks one focused question. The client explores a new angle. The question was well chosen, well timed, brief. That is mastery level coaching, and meets is exactly the right rating. At exceeds, the coach offers a single word. The energy in the room shifts. The client goes somewhere neither of them expected. No technique visible, just a coach being fully present and the conversation transforming. Same statement, different quality of execution. The meets example would impress most evaluators. The exceeds example would make experienced MCCs pause. Your evaluation skill needs to hold both and distinguish them with evidence. As you review the full statement list, watch for specific language shifts. The slide shows a handful of these. Words like holistically, consistently demonstrates, nuances of language and emotions and energy, multiple dimensions, succinct. These words don't describe what the coach does. They describe the quality with which they do it. That's the structural difference across the 3 levels. At ACC, the statements describe actions. At PCC, they describe patterns. At MCC, they describe qualities of being. The language shift is subtle on paper. The performance standard it represents is not subtle at all. 21 statements across 6 competencies. The architecture is clear. The threshold language tells you what mastery looks like on paper. The next challenge is the minimum skills requirements, the consistent and inconsistent behavior descriptions that reveal what MCC coaching actually sounds like in practice. The MCC inconsistent behaviors are the most subtle in the system. What you'll find is that MCC inconsistency often looks like very good PCC coaching. That's the precision we're building toward, and it's what makes this module the most demanding of the 3.